If you stay, I'll pretend I didn't see you. It started as an ordinary visit, one of those evenings where you tell yourself you'll only stay for a little while. The rain had been falling since afternoon, blurring the world outside her window into silver streaks. Inside, her home felt like another world altogether, warm light pooling across the wooden floors, the faint scent of jasmine tea hanging in the air, and the quiet hum of a record spinning somewhere in the background. She was seated by the window when I arrived, hair loosely tied, glasses perched low, a book half open in her lap. There was something disarming about her calm. Most people fill silence with small talk, she filled it with presence. Didn't think the rain would keep you out this long, she said with a soft smile, setting her book aside. Her tone carried that familiar mix, teasing yet thoughtful, as if she saw straight through my excuses for showing up again. I laughed it off, pretending I'd just been in the neighborhood. But she knew better. She always did. Every time I found my way back to her porch, it wasn't coincidence, it was gravity. Something about her steadiness, her quiet confidence, pulled me in. We talked for a while, nothing too personal, music, weather, the smell of rain. But beneath the easy words was a tension that neither of us dared name. The way her eyes lingered a second too long when I spoke. The way my breath slowed when she brushed past me to pour tea. Even the silence between sentences felt alive. When the clock struck 10, I stood up, meaning to leave. I told her I should probably go, that it was late, that the roads would be slick. She nodded, though her eyes didn't follow me to the door. She just sat there, tracing the rim of her teacup with her fingertip, lost somewhere between thought and hesitation. I turned the handle, opened the door to the rain, and then heard it, her voice, soft but deliberate, just above a whisper. If you stay, she said, I'll pretend I didn't see you. The words stopped me cold. They weren't an invitation, not exactly. More like a line drawn in invisible ink. Stay, and she'd let me. Leave, and we'd both pretend none of this ever existed. The air between us changed after that, thicker, quieter, charged. I closed the door halfway, not sure if I was choosing recklessness or honesty. She didn't look up, but I saw the faintest curve of her lips, a smile that meant she knew exactly what I was deciding. That was the night the rhythm between us shifted. Not in grand gestures or confessions, just in the unspoken truth that we both wanted to linger. And maybe that's where every slow burn begins, not with a kiss, not even a touch, but with a moment that dares you to stay when you know you shouldn't. I didn't move at first. Her words still hung in the air, fragile, echoing, like a note that refused to fade. If you stay, I'll pretend I didn't see you. It was a strange permission, both denial and confession wrapped together. The rain pressed harder against the windows, a steady rhythm filling the silence between us. I stood by the door, fingers resting on the handle, half in and half out of her world. She hadn't turned toward me yet. She just sat there, still tracing circles along her teacup, pretending to be absorbed in nothing at all. My shoes were damp from the porch, my pulse even louder than the storm. It felt absurd, how something so simple, the act of staying, could feel like crossing a boundary neither of us had spoken about. When I finally stepped back inside, she didn't react. She didn't even look up. She just reached for the teapot, poured another cup, and said quietly, You should probably take this before it gets cold. Her calm was almost deceptive. Beneath that steady exterior, I could sense something stirring, a quiet, careful awareness of what was happening. When our fingers brushed as I took the cup, it wasn't the first time, but it felt entirely new. The warmth of her hand lingered longer than the tea's steam. Do you always make people work this hard just to have tea with you? I asked, trying to disguise the tremor in my voice with humor. She smiled faintly. Only the ones who don't know when to leave. We both knew it wasn't just about tea or timing. Every word between us carried more than it said. I sat down across from her, the old wooden table between us feeling smaller than it ever had before. The conversation that followed was softer, slower. We talked about trivial things, how the rain made everything smell cleaner, how her students were driving her mad, how she wished she'd learned to play the piano. But beneath each topic ran a current, a quiet awareness of proximity. At one point, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her face. She looked tired, but not in a defeated way, more like someone who had spent years carrying things too heavy to explain. I found myself wanting to ask what those things were. Instead, I said nothing. I just watched her, the curve of her wrist as she lifted her cup, the soft movement of her lips as she spoke, the way her eyes softened when she caught me looking. When the thunder rolled and the lights flickered, she let out a small laugh, almost childlike. "Guess you'll have to stay until it passes," she murmured. I smiled, though my heart was already racing. The rain was relentless, but so was the silence, deep, unspoken, beautiful. And somewhere inside it, I understood, staying wasn't the mistake. Pretending it meant nothing would be. The storm dragged on into the night, and with every hour that passed, the silence between us deepened, not uncomfortable, but weighted, as if words had become too fragile to carry what we both felt. She lit a candle when the power flickered out, its glow softening everything, the lines of her face, the edges of the room, even the distance between us. It was strange how intimate a small flame could make the darkness feel. I watched her move around the kitchen, barefoot and unhurried, her shadow following close behind. Every motion she made was quiet, deliberate, like someone who had long ago learned how to live gracefully alone. "Do you ever get lonely here?" I asked before I could stop myself. She paused by the counter, her hand resting on the edge. "Sometimes," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "But I've made peace with it. Loneliness isn't always a punishment, sometimes it's just space to breathe." Her honesty caught me off guard. There was no sadness in her tone, only understanding, the kind that comes from time and distance. I wanted to tell her that her house didn't feel lonely at all. That her voice, her presence, even the quiet way she existed, filled the space completely. But I didn't say that. Instead, I just nodded and looked at the candle, its small flame flickering between us. When she finally sat down again, she drew her knees close and wrapped her hands around her cup. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly. "I'm just trying not to ruin the peace," I replied with a smile. She gave me that look, the kind that lingered, that searched, that seemed to ask questions without words. The kind of look that made it impossible to hide behind humor. "Peace doesn't break that easily," she said after a moment. "You'd be surprised what it can hold." There it was again, that quiet wisdom of hers, gentle yet grounding. I realized then how much I admired it. The way she carried calm, even when something unspoken hummed beneath the surface. At some point, she reached over to fix the candle wick. Her fingers brushed mine, a small, almost accidental touch, but it sent warmth racing through me. Neither of us pulled away. The silence grew thicker, heavier, yet somehow comforting. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. The candlelight caught in them, soft and steady. For a second, either of us breathed. I wanted to say something, anything, but she beat me to it. "Storms always sound louder when someone else is here," she whispered. And maybe she was right. Because even though the thunder rolled outside, the loudest sound in that moment was the unspoken truth between us, that something was changing, quietly but undeniably. Not through touch. Not through confession. But through the kind of silence that says everything you're too careful to admit. By midnight the rain had softened to a mist, but neither of us made any move toward ending the night. The storm outside had become secondary to the one that hummed quietly between us, a storm of restraint, of what-ifs, of nearly confessed feelings hanging in the air like unspent electricity. She was sitting on the couch now, a throw blanket over her legs, the candlelight still flickering in its place on the table. I had taken the armchair opposite her, though the space felt too far. The distance between us wasn't measured in steps, it was measured in hesitation. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching her. "You ever wish time would slow down on nights like this?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "It already has," she said. "You just haven't noticed." Her voice had that low warmth that always disarmed me, not flirtatious, not intentional, just real. It was the kind of tone that pulled you closer without trying. For a while, we sat like that, trading quiet thoughts in a world that felt paused. She talked about her garden, how the rain always seemed to undo her hard work but gave her a reason to start again. I listened, captivated not by the words, but by the rhythm of her voice, the way it softened when she cared about something simple. Then she stopped mid-sentence, looking at me in that searching way again. "You shouldn't look at people like that," she said softly. "Like what?" "Like you're afraid you'll forget them." I didn't know what to say. Maybe because she was right. Maybe because she was the kind of person you didn't just see, you remembered. The silence after that was fragile. I could hear the rain tapping lightly against the window, the faint ticking of the clock on the shelf, even the sound of her breathing, calm, steady, but shallow. When she stood to put the tea things away, I instinctively reached out and caught her hand. It wasn't planned, it wasn't bold, just a reflex born out of something deeper than thought. Her fingers froze beneath mine, soft, warm, still. For a moment, she didn't pull away. The air felt alive, thick with everything unsaid. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, calm, but no longer guarded. There was something there, something that looked dangerously like understanding. Then she drew a slow breath, as if steadying herself. "You should get some sleep," she whispered, her voice barely holding. I released her hand, but the warmth stayed, echoing, pulsing. She turned away before I could speak, walking toward the hallway, her movements graceful but strained, like someone choosing to protect something fragile. That night, I lay awake on her couch, the candle burning low, her scent faintly on the air. The storm had passed. But between us, something had shifted, not broken, not begun, just waiting. The kind of moment that almost happened, and somehow meant more because it didn't. Dawn crept in slowly, cautious and quiet, as if afraid to disturb what the night had left behind. The rain had stopped some time before sunrise, leaving the world washed clean. Through the window, soft light spilled across her living room, catching on the empty cups, the folded blanket, and the single candle burned nearly to its base. I woke on the couch to the faint sound of a kettle and the soft hum of a song, low, unhurried, familiar. For a moment I didn't move. The air still held the warmth of last night's tension, faint but unmistakable, like the echo of something that had wanted to be said but never found the courage. When I sat up, she was already in the kitchen, hair still loose from sleep, a soft sweater draped over her shoulders. She looked nothing like the composed woman I first met, and somehow, everything like the version I hadn't realized I'd been hoping to see. "Morning," she said without turning around. Her voice was lighter than last night, almost carefully casual. "Morning," I echoed. I didn't mean to fall asleep." She smiled faintly, still facing the window. "You needed it. The rain makes everyone stay longer than they mean to." That line could have meant nothing. Or it could have meant everything. I couldn't tell anymore. When she turned, she held out a mug. "Tea. Still no sugar, right?" I nodded, taking it. Our fingers brushed again, just a brief touch, but it stirred the same quiet electricity. She felt it too. I saw it in the way her eyes flickered down, then away. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The light between us was softer now, diffused through the thin morning clouds. It was peaceful, but also delicate, like both of us were pretending nothing had changed while knowing that it had. "I kept thinking about what you said last night," I began quietly. She tilted her head. "About what?" "About not looking at people like I'll forget them." A shadow of a smile crossed her lips. "And? I don't think I could forget you," I said, barely above a whisper. For a long moment, she didn't reply. She just looked at me, really looked, with that same unreadable softness that could mean everything or nothing at all. Then she exhaled, her voice steady but low. "That's the kind of thing people say before they realize how easy forgetting can be." Her words weren't cold. They were protective, like she was trying to shield both of us from something that might hurt if we let it. The clock ticked between us. I wanted to reach out, to close the space, to tell her I wasn't the kind of person who'd forget. But instead I said, "Then maybe I'll have to prove you wrong." She didn't answer, just smiled faintly and poured more tea. But I saw it then, the smallest tremor in her hand. Proof enough that maybe she didn't want me to leave just yet. The following days felt like walking a fine line, a quiet, unspoken balance between what we allowed ourselves to feel and what we were trying hard not to. I found reasons to stop by again, a book I'd borrowed and hadn't finished, a plant she said needed repotting, a record she wanted me to hear. None of it mattered, not really. What mattered was that she didn't tell me not to come. Each visit felt like stepping back into a space that remembered us. The same soft lighting, the faint scent of jasmine and rain still lingering somewhere in the wood. But something between us had changed. Every glance, every pause carried a new weight. She tried to act as if everything was normal, her conversations drifting easily from the mundane to the poetic. But I saw it, the way her hands hesitated near mine when she passed me something, the way her laughter caught in her throat when our eyes met for too long. One evening, I arrived to find her sitting outside, the last of the sunset washing gold over her face. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "Thought you'd stopped showing up without a reason," she said softly, shielding her eyes from the light. I sat beside her, close but not too close. "Maybe I just stopped pretending I needed one." She turned to me, a hint of amusement in her expression, but her eyes gave her away. There was something like fear there. Not of me, but of what my staying meant. "You know," she said quietly, "people will talk if they see you here so often." "Let them," I replied. Her smile faltered. "It's not that simple." "It could be," I said. Her silence stretched. She looked away, watching the horizon where the light met the dark. "You're young," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "You still believe things can be simple." I wanted to argue, to tell her that what I felt wasn't naive or fleeting. But the tenderness in her voice disarmed me. There was a quiet sadness to her, the kind that comes from living long enough to know that some things don't last no matter how much they should. After a while she stood, brushing the dust from her hands. "You should head home before it gets dark." I didn't move. "Do you want me to go?" She hesitated. Then, without turning, she said, "Wanting and needing aren't always the same." The words hung in the air like a confession she hadn't meant to let slip. I stood too, stepping close enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder just inches away. "Then tell me which one this is," I said softly. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, long enough for me to see the truth flicker across her face. But when she opened them, all she said was, "Good night." As I walked away, I realized that silence could be the heaviest kind of honesty, the kind that says everything, even when the words never come. The next time I saw her, the air felt different. The days had stretched quietly between us, filled with what we hadn't said. I told myself I wouldn't go back, that giving her space was the right thing. But space had a strange way of becoming distance, and I couldn't bear the thought of her silence becoming permanent. So I went. Not to push, not to ask, but simply to see her again, to be reminded that she was real. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, not startled, not upset, just surprised in a way that felt almost tender. She stood there for a moment, then stepped aside wordlessly, letting me in. The house smelled faintly of rain again, though the sky outside was clear. "I thought you'd stopped coming," she said finally, her tone even, but softer than I expected. "I tried," I admitted. "Didn't work." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like something between relief and resignation. "You always find a reason to be here. Maybe the reason doesn't matter anymore," I said. "Maybe I just want to be." That silence again, the familiar one that spoke more honestly than words ever could. She turned away, setting her mug down, but her shoulders had softened. "I wasn't trying to push you away," she said quietly. "I just didn't want this to become something you'd regret." I took a step closer, my voice low. "You think I'd regret caring about you?" Her breath caught barely, but enough. When she looked up, her eyes were unguarded for the first time in weeks. "You don't understand. I've spent years learning how not to expect anyone to stay." I reached out, not touching her yet, just close enough for her to feel it. Then let me unlearn that with you. The words hung between us, fragile and real. For a long time, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she took a step forward, small, hesitant, until the space between us dissolved. Her hand found mine, light at first, as if testing whether it was allowed. Then she laced her fingers through mine and held on, not tightly, but with quiet certainty. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I said. But maybe that's the point. The world outside was still, the air thick with the warmth of everything unsaid finally finding its way to the surface. She leaned in, resting her head lightly against my shoulder, the rhythm of her breath steady and calm. For a long time, we just stood there, no declarations, no promises, just presence. The kind of stillness that felt like arrival. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely a breath. You stayed. I smiled, my hand tightening gently around hers. You told me to pretend you didn't see me. But maybe this time, you can stop pretending. And she did, not with words, but with a quiet, lingering look that said stay, and for once, meant it.